Okay, we're reviewing the various symptoms that are used in diagnosing depression and how they show up in actual practice. And keep in mind, all of these symptoms are pretty common aspects of human experience. Whether we have clinical depression or not, we'll have most of them in bits and pieces somewhere along the line. So far, we've talked about low mood, anhedonia, sleep problems, and appetite. This time, we're going to discuss two factors, fatigue and changes in the way that a person moves. First up, fatigue. In the DSM criteria, it's fatigue or loss of energy. And as usual, it has to be most of the day, nearly every day. This can sound a lot like the sleep problems. You know, if you don't sleep at night, of course you're going to be tired during the day. But fatigue is not daytime sleepiness, a feeling that you could fall asleep easily if you laid down. This is more a sense that your energy is depleted, like everything takes more energy than it normally would. So normally you might look at a single flight of stairs and not see it as a problem. With fatigue, it'll seem more like Mount Everest. Some people report that their limbs actually feel heavier, like you've gained about 100 pounds, or like someone just turned up the dial on gravity. If you've ever been to the gym and had a really tough workout, maybe with one of those gung-ho personal trainers, the next day you may have felt something like this, except it's not muscle stiffness. It's more a sense of profound physical weakness. There's a mental component to fatigue as well. It can seem almost impossible to get yourself moving. Initiating behavior becomes very difficult. So you're sitting on the couch thinking you should really get up and do the dishes, but this profound sense of inertia overtakes you. Not everyone with depression reports this symptom, but most do. Whether it's strong enough or constant enough to be counted as one of the 5 symptoms toward a diagnosis, that's another thing. Often I find that a person who really does meet the diagnosis by other symptoms, they do have this fatigue, but just not enough for it to be one of the 5. And then what? Well, changes in the way that people move. Different symptoms show up in different proportions of people. If we have 100 people who have diagnosable depression, the vast majority will have that pretty constant low mood. But of all the symptoms in the diagnostic list, this is the one that we see least often. It still happens, and it's more likely the more severe the depression is, but in mild to moderate depression, you often just don't see it. So, what is it? Well, it's one of those symptoms that can go 2 ways from normal. The classic form is called psychomotor retardation. And what that means is the person talks and moves more slowly than they usually do. And to count, it has to be visible to other people. A lot of people with depression feel slower than usual, but others don't really notice it. But when someone's really got this symptom, you do see it. I don't mean to parody what it looks like here. My point is that it's really quite extreme. And again, we see it most in quite severe depression. The other direction is called psychomotor agitation. And this is more common in milder cases of depression, though again, many people just don't show either one. The agitation is a speeding up of movement or difficulty sitting still. You know, there's a really antsy feeling about it, and usually there's a fair bit of distractibility as well. It's hard to stick with a task, and if they try to force themselves to, let's say, keep sorting through a stack of papers, they may have a rising sense of panic. It's a little bit like the panicky, claustrophobic sense that people get when they're shut up in a closed space. It's why a lot of people don't like visiting caves. They worry that they're going to get that feeling. In terms of distraction, it's a little like what people with attention deficit disorder describe. I just can't sit here. And again, it has to be visible to others and be a change from their usual style. They look agitated and usually anxious. And for people who have this in treatment, we'll actually just try to exploit it a little bit. You can't sit still. Okay, let's use that feeling to get you out of the house and go for a brisk walk or go for some exercise. Every so often, though, you'll see a person who's depressed and they're trying to burn it out with so much exercise that it's actually counterproductive. They're at the gym 6 hours a day, or they're risking bodily injury. They're doing so much. So fatigue is pretty common, but these physical movement changes are less so. And if people get them, agitation is more common than slowing down, but mainly because somewhat milder forms of clinical depression are more common than the very severe type. And it tends to be in severe that you get this visible slowing. Next up, I'll talk about some of the cognitive changes that happen in depression. I have an online course on self-care for depression. There's a link below. Not a substitute, though, for care by a qualified healthcare professional.